The house was quiet when Claire noticed the empty space. It was late afternoon when the light turns soft and everything looks more honest than people are ready to be. She stood in her bedroom, fingers still smelling faintly of dish soap, staring at the open jewelry box on her dresser. The velvet inside held a few earrings, a cheap necklace, a tangle of forgotten chains. But where the thin gold bracelet should have been, there was nothing. Just a pale impression in the fabric, like a ghost of metal. Her chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with the bracelet itself and everything to do with what it represented. It had been her mother's, passed down not with ceremony, but with a quiet urgency in a hospital room. The last thing her mother pressed into her hand before the machines took over the heavy breathing. Now, it was gone. She checked the bathroom counter, the nightstand, even the laundry basket. She walked back to the jewelry box, closed it, opened it again, as if the bracelet might reappear out of politeness. It did not. Someone had taken it. Her eyes went, almost automatically, to the window that overlooked the street. She thought of everyone who had been in the house that week. The delivery guy, the neighbor's kid who dropped off a book, Ethan's friend. The thought arrived like a shadow sliding over the floor. Malik. She could still see them, just a few hours earlier, racing up the stairs. Ethan's laugh bouncing against the walls, Malik's deeper voice chasing after it. Their sneakers thudding on the steps, the music from Ethan's room spilling under the door. She had told herself she was glad Ethan had a friend who made him laugh like that, glad he was not always locked behind a screen. But that gladness had always been wrapped in something else. Something she did not name. Now, staring at the empty space where the bracelet used to be, she gave that something a name without even realizing it. Of course. Her body moved before her mind could argue. Down the hallway, past the family photos, the framed school pictures where Ethan's smile had gradually become more guarded with each passing year. She knocked on his door once, then pushed it open. Ethan looked up from his desk, headphones around his neck, a pencil balanced between his fingers. Malik sat cross-legged on the floor, scrolling through something on his phone. They both turned their heads in unison, the easy contentment of the moment suspended in the air like dust. "Mom?" Ethan said. "What's up?" Her gaze flicked over the room, the open closet, the unmade bed, the scattered socks, the backpack half unzipped. Her eyes landed on Malik, then on his backpack near the corner of the room, slightly closer to the hallway than Ethan's. "Can I talk to you for a moment?" she said, and her voice came out too flat, too sharp. "Sure," Ethan replied, pushing his chair back. "Just me or—" "You," she said, "alone." She saw it then, a barely perceptible change in Malik's posture. His shoulders tightened, his hand stilled on his phone. Not because he had done something wrong, but because he recognized the pattern. Adults wanting to speak without him there, doors closing, conversations that were not meant for his ears. It struck her that he understood this moment better than she did. Ethan stepped into the hallway, pulling the door almost shut behind him. "What is it?" "The bracelet," she said, struggling to keep her voice even. "My mother's bracelet. It is gone." "Gone?" Ethan repeated. "You mean you lost it?" "I do not lose that bracelet," she said. "It was in the jewelry box this morning. Now it is not." He frowned, thinking. "Did you wear it today?" "No." "Maybe you took it off last night and put it somewhere else. I already checked. It is not anywhere else." A beat of silence stretched between them, thin and taut. "Okay," Ethan said slowly. "So what are you asking me?" "I am asking," she said, heart pounding, "if anyone has been in our room today while I was out." Ethan blinked, then his eyes narrowed. "You think Malik came in here and took it?" She did not say the words out loud. She did not have to. They hung between them anyway. "His backpack," she said instead, gesturing toward the door. "It was near the hallway. He could have—" She stopped herself because the image had already solidified in her mind. Malik slipping quietly into their room. Malik opening the jewelry box. Ethan's voice cut into the picture, sharp and incredulous. "Are you serious right now?" "Ethan, just listen," she said. "I am not accusing anyone. I just need to know what happened." "You are accusing him," Ethan said. "You are looking straight at me and saying it without saying it." Her throat tightened. "Do you have any other explanation?" "Yes," he shot back. "About 1,000. Maybe it fell. Maybe you misplaced it. Maybe someone else was here. But no, you jump straight to the one person who has done nothing but be nice to you since the day we met." "Enough," she said, her voice rising. "Do not talk to me like that." He took a step back, breathing hard. "You do not know him. You have never tried to know him. You just see what you want to see." "I see facts," she insisted, even as her chest ached. "The bracelet is gone. He was here. That is not nothing." Ethan stared at her, and in his eyes she saw something break. Not his respect for her rules, not his adolescent patience. Something deeper. A belief he had carried about who his mother was. He turned and opened the door wide again. "Malik," he said, his voice shaking, "we have to go." Malik looked up, reading the room instantly. He stood, slipping his phone into his pocket. "What happened?" he asked quietly. "My mom thinks you stole her bracelet," Ethan said, each word like a stone hitting the floor. Malik's eyes went to Claire, and for the first time she really looked at him. The careful distance in his posture, the way he attended to every adult's tone, the slight hesitation before he spoke, as if measuring exactly how much space he was allowed to occupy. "I did not take anything," he said softly. "I never said that," Claire replied, but the words felt brittle in her mouth. "You did not have to," Malik answered, still calm but wounded. "I know what it sounds like." There was no rage in his tone, no raised voice, no dramatic denial. Just the exhausted sound of someone who had been here before and had already rehearsed all the ways it could go wrong. If you are hearing this and feeling that knot in your stomach, that mix of anger and sadness, you are not alone. Moments like this are happening in real homes, behind real doors, where assumptions speak louder than facts. If you want to walk through more stories that confront these hidden places in us, you can stay with us, subscribe, and share a time when you saw someone judged before anyone bothered to ask who they really were. Stories change us most when we dare to talk about the ones that hurt. Ethan grabbed his jacket. Malik picked up his backpack. They brushed past her as they headed down the hallway. Claire stood rooted to the spot, the smell of Ethan's shampoo lingering in the air, the echo of Malik's quiet words following them down the stairs. The front door closed. A car engine started outside. Silence returned to the house, but it did not feel like peace. It felt like the moment after a glass shatters, when everything is still but dangerous. Claire went back to her room. She opened the jewelry box again, as if a different outcome might unfold. The empty space did not change. Her reflection in the mirror behind it looked harsher than she remembered. The lines around her mouth deeper, her eyes more guarded. "This is my home," she told herself. "My things, my memories, my responsibility to protect them." Yet somewhere beneath that familiar script, another voice spoke, smaller but persistent. "Are you sure?" She shook it off and went downstairs. On the kitchen counter lay a stack of mail she had not sorted yet. A flyer peeked out from beneath a bill. "Neighborhood crime alert." Bold letters, urgent language. A picture of a young man's shadow walking near a driveway. "Watch for suspicious behavior. Lock your doors. Report anything unusual." She had left it there, untouched, but the message had seeped in anyway. Not through words, but through repetition. Through news stories shared at work, through casual comments at church, through whispers among parents at school events. She turned the flyer face down. When Daniel came home that evening, he found her at the dining table, the jewelry box beside her like a small, accusing witness. "What is going on?" he asked, loosening his tie. "The bracelet is gone," she said. He frowned. "Which bracelet?" "My mother's." He sat down opposite her, leaning forward. "Did you misplace it?" "Why does everyone keep saying that?" she snapped, then immediately regretted the sharpness. "I am not careless with that bracelet, Dan. It was there this morning. Now it is not." He studied her face, then the box. "Who has been in the house?" She hesitated. "Ethan's friend was here," she said. "Moloch." "Okay," Daniel said slowly. "And you think?" "I do not know what to think," she said, though in truth she had already locked on to one possibility. Daniel rubbed his hands together, buying time. "Claire, maybe we should slow down before we accuse a kid of something we cannot prove. Remember when you thought the cleaner had taken your earrings and they turned up in the car? This is different," she insisted, but the memory stung. "Is it?" he asked gently. She looked away. "You did not see his backpack. It was practically in our bedroom doorway. Why would he leave it there?" "Because teenage boys are messy?" Daniel suggested, a hint of humor trying to diffuse the tension. She did not smile. "You do not like this kid," he said finally. And there it was, the thing they had never said out loud. "I do not know him," she countered. "You have not tried," Daniel replied. "He has been coming here for months, and the only real conversation you have had with him was about shoes on the carpet." "He was tracking mud," she said automatically. "From the rain," Daniel said. "Everyone was tracking mud that day." She folded her arms, a shield across her chest. "You think I am making this up?" "I think you are scared," he said quietly. "Your mother's bracelet is gone, and that feels like losing her all over again. But fear is a bad detective." The words hit her harder than he intended. She stood abruptly, the chair legs scraping the floor. "So, what do you suggest?" she demanded. "I just pretend nothing happened? Wait around hoping it magically reappears?" "No," Daniel said. "I think we talk to Ethan, calmly. We ask questions. We do not turn this into a witch hunt." She thought of Ethan's face in the hallway, the disappointment in his eyes. There had already been a hunt, and she had led it without realizing. Upstairs, Ethan's door was closed. When she knocked, there was no answer. She tried again. "Ethan, please open the door." A moment later, she heard the click of the lock. The door opened a few inches. He stood there, not fully inside the room, not fully out, inhabiting that in-between space where teenagers live when they are not sure if the people who raised them are still on their side. "We are not calling the police," he said flatly, before she could speak. "I never said we would," she replied. "You were thinking it," he said. "I saw that flyer on the counter. You have been on edge about everything for weeks." She swallowed. "I am just trying to keep you safe." "Safe from who?" he asked, the frustration finally spilling over. "From my friends? From anyone who does not look like the people at your book club?" "That is not fair," she said. "What is not fair," he shot back, "is that you decided who Malik was before you ever asked him anything real. You know he helps take care of his little brother every afternoon while his mom works? You know he stays late after school to tutor kids who are failing math? You never bothered to find that out. But one missing bracelet and suddenly he is capable of anything?" Her defenses trembled under the weight of his words. "You are very sure of him." "I am sure of what I have seen," Ethan said. "Things you have never looked at." The conversation ended not with resolution, but with Ethan closing the door again, gently, not slamming it. Somehow, that quiet finality hurt more. Days drifted by, heavy and slow. The bracelet did not appear. Each time Claire passed Ethan's room, the closed door felt like a judgment she could not escape. Malik stopped coming over. The house felt emptier, though no physical object had left, except a strip of gold and whatever trust had been holding them together. At the grocery store, she overheard parents whispering about a fight in the parking lot after school. She caught fragments. A boy defending his friend. Someone's mom getting involved. The word stolen hovering like smoke. She pulled out her phone in the car and scrolled through social media. No photos of Ethan with Malik. Pictures that used to be filled with both of them were now solitary. A space beside Ethan where someone had been cut out by silence and hurt. One afternoon, she went into Ethan's room while he was at school. It felt like trespassing, but she told herself she was the parent, that parents were allowed to search when something was wrong. She checked drawers, the closet, under the bed. No bracelet. But inside his backpack, she found something else. A small folded slip of paper, a receipt. The ink was slightly faded, the paper worn at the edges. A date from weeks ago. A pawn shop downtown. Her heart thudded in her chest. Item: gold bracelet. Her stomach dropped. The name on the receipt was Ethan's. For a moment, the room blurred. She gripped the edge of the desk to steady herself. Her son. Her son had pawned her mother's bracelet. The story in her mind rearranged itself with dizzying speed. Perhaps it had been a plan between the boys. Perhaps Ethan was covering for Malik. Perhaps Ethan had done it alone. Each scenario was worse than the last. When Ethan got home that day, she was waiting for him at the kitchen table, the receipt in front of her like a piece of evidence in a courtroom. He saw it the moment he walked in. His face went pale. "Where did you get that?" he asked. "I could ask you the same thing," she replied, holding his gaze. "You want to tell me what this is?" He looked between her and the paper, guilt and defiance warring in his eyes. "You went through my stuff." "You sold my mother's bracelet," she said, her voice cracking. "Do not make this about privacy." He flinched as if she had struck him. "You do not understand." "Then make me understand," she said, "because right now, all I see is betrayal." "If I tell you," he said quietly, "you are just going to twist it into whatever you already think." "Try me," she challenged. He took a deep breath, then shook his head. "No, Not like this. Not with you already convinced that the worst version of me is the real one." He turned to walk away. "Do not you dare," she said, standing so fast the chair toppled behind her. "You will not walk away from this conversation, not after what you have done." They stared at each other across the kitchen, the air between them thick with fear and anger. Daniel walked in on the scene, stopped, looked from one to the other. "What is happening now?" he asked. Claire thrust the receipt at him. "Our son pawned the bracelet weeks ago." Daniel's eyes widened. He turned to Ethan. "Is this true?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Yes." "Why?"
Daniel asked, stunned. Ethan's throat worked, but no sound came out. Claire felt something inside her harden. "Was it your idea?" she demanded, "or Malik's?" Ethan's eyes flashed. "Leave him out of this." "I cannot," she said. "He was here the day I found it missing. His backpack was in my room. Now I find out you sold it. Did you need the money for something? For the two of you? What were you involved in?" "You really want the answer?" Ethan shot back. "You want to hear why your son did something desperate with something he knew you treasured?" "Yes," she said, "I do." "Then listen," he said, voice shaking. "Really listen. Not the way you listened when you looked at Malik like he was nothing more than a threat standing in our hallway." Her breath caught. For a second, she glimpsed the boy he used to be, running through the sprinkler in the backyard, cheeks flushed with joy, trusting that every grown-up in his world was on his side. That boy was gone, replaced by someone taller, more guarded, someone who looked at her as if she were a stranger. Before he could say more, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, and his expression shifted to alarm. "I have to go," he muttered. "You are not going anywhere," Claire said. "It is Malik," he replied. "Something happened at school. I have to go." The urgency in his voice pierced her anger, if only slightly. "I am coming with you," she said. He hesitated, then nodded once. They left the house in brittle silence, the receipt still on the table, the questions trailing after them unsatisfied. At the school parking lot, a small group of students stood clustered near the curb. A teacher was speaking to a security officer. Malik leaned against a lamppost, hands in his pockets, face tight with frustration. His mother stood nearby, arms crossed, listening with a controlled stiffness that spoke of a long history with conversations like this. When Ethan and Claire approached, Malik's eyes lit up at the sight of his friend, then cooled as he noticed her. "What is going on?" Ethan asked. The security officer glanced at them. "Nothing you need to worry about, son." "I do worry about it," Ethan said. "He is my friend." Malik's mother spoke then, her voice calm but edged with steel. "They said someone saw Malik near a teacher's desk during lunch. A wallet went missing. Suddenly, my son is the only one they can picture in the story." Claire felt her stomach twist. The pattern repeated itself everywhere, it seemed. A missing object, an easy assumption. The teacher held up his hands defensively. "We are not accusing anyone. We just need to ask questions." "You are not asking," Malik's mother replied. "You are circling. There is a difference." Claire watched Malik's face, the way his eyes darted between the adults, the way his shoulders hunched as if warding off a blow he could not see. It was the same posture he had to her in the hallway that day, the same tired understanding. Something inside her cracked. "I believe him," Ethan said loudly. "He did not do it." "You were not there," the security officer said. "We have to look into every possibility." "And does every possibility look like him?" Ethan asked, gesturing toward Malik.
Or do you ever imagine it might be one of the kids whose parents donate to the school fundraisers? The words hung in the air, startling in their boldness. Claire felt the eyes of other parents on them, some sympathetic, some wary. She saw herself reflected in their faces, her own fear and bias refracted back at her from a dozen variations. For a moment, she wanted to fade into the background, to retreat into the safety of pretending this had nothing to do with her. But the bracelet, the receipt, the accusation in her own hallway would not let her hide. She stepped forward. "Has anyone actually seen him take anything?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm inside. The security officer shook his head. "We are still checking cameras." "Then maybe we should wait for facts before we decide who is suspicious," she said. Malik's mother looked at her, surprised. It was not forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first time their eyes had met without a wall between them. Back at home, the evening settled like dust. Ethan stayed in his room. Daniel worked late. Claire sat at the kitchen table again, the house around her feeling both familiar and alien, like a set built to resemble a life she was not sure she deserved. On the table, the pawn shop receipt seemed to pulse with meaning. She picked it up, read the address, memorized it. The next morning, she drove across town. The pawn shop sat on a corner where the sidewalks were cracked and the traffic lights changed a little slower. A bell jingled when she walked in. Inside, glass cases displayed rings and watches and instruments, each object holding a story of desperation or choice. The man behind the counter looked up. "Can I help you?" She handed him the receipt. "This was my son," she said. "I need to know if the bracelet is still here." He took the paper, adjusted his glasses, and scanned it. "This was a few weeks ago. Let me check." She waited while he disappeared into a back room. The seconds stretched tight. She noticed a guitar with a broken string, a wedding ring alone in a single velvet slot. Back at home, the evening settled like dust. Ethan stayed in his room. Daniel worked late. Claire sat at the kitchen table again, the house around her feeling both familiar and alien, like a set built to resemble a life she was not sure she deserved. On the table, the pawn shop receipt seemed to pulse with meaning. She picked it up, read the address, memorized it. The next morning, she drove across town. The pawn shop sat on a corner where the sidewalks were cracked and the traffic lights changed a little slower. A bell jingled when she walked in. Inside, glass cases displayed rings and watches and instruments, each object holding a story of desperation or choice. The man behind the counter looked up. "Can I help you?" She handed him the receipt. "This was my son," she said. "I need to know if the bracelet is still here." He took the paper, adjusted his glasses, and scanned it. "This was a few weeks ago. Let me check." She waited while he disappeared into a back room. The seconds stretched tight. She noticed a guitar with a broken string, a wedding ring alone in a single velvet slot, a camera with a cracked screen. When the man returned, he held something in his hand. The bracelet. It looked smaller than she remembered, fragile, almost ashamed. Her breath caught in her throat. "We still had it," the man said. "No one bought it yet." She reached out, fingers trembling, and touched the metal. It was cool, solid, undeniably real. Her mother's bracelet. Not stolen, not lost. Bartered away for something her son had not yet explained. "Can I buy it back?" she asked. "Of course," he said. "You will need to pay back what we gave him, plus a fee." She nodded, barely hearing the amount. She pulled out her card, scribbled a signature, clutched the bracelet as if it might vanish again. Before she left, she paused. "Do you remember my son?" she asked. Why he came in? The man thought for a moment. "Quiet kid," he said. Looked nervous. Kept saying he was sure, that he wanted to do the right thing. The right thing, she repeated faintly. By selling his mother's bracelet? The man shrugged. Sometimes kids think they need to fix things they did not break. He mentioned something about medical bills, or a lawyer. I do not remember exactly. It was busy that day. Medical bills. Lawyer. A series of images flashed in her mind. Malik's tired eyes, his mother's long shifts, the whispers at school about his older brother who had gotten into trouble or had been accused of it, depending on who you asked. Her grip on the bracelet tightened. Back in the car, she sat with the door closed and the engine off. The city moved around her in slow motion. She could hear her own breathing, feel the weight of every choice she had made in the last few weeks.
Her son had sold something priceless to her in order to help someone she had treated as disposable. If you are listening to this and feeling the sting of recognition, maybe you have had your own blind spots exposed. Maybe you have judged someone before you knew their story, or stayed silent when your gut told you something was wrong. These stories are not just entertainment. They are mirrors. If any part of Claire's journey echoes in you, you can share your experience, your turning point, in the comments, and stay close to this space by subscribing. The more we talk honestly about these moments, the harder it becomes to hide behind comfortable excuses. That afternoon, Claire waited in the living room until Ethan came home. She did not pace. She did not rehearse speeches. She sat very still, the bracelet coiled in her palm like a confession. When he walked through the door and saw her there, he stiffened. "We need to talk," she said softly. "You keep saying that," he replied. "It never sounds like listening." She held up the bracelet. His eyes widened. He looked at her hand, then at her face. "You got it back." "I went to the pawn shop," she said. "The man remembered you. He said you were trying to do the right thing." Ethan looked away, jaw clenched. "I do not need him to defend me. I think you do not need to keep carrying this alone," she answered. They sat opposite each other on the couch, a space between them crowded with words. "Why, Ethan?" she asked finally. "Why did you sell something you knew meant so much to me?" He took a deep breath, then exhaled slowly, as if letting go of a burden he had been bracing against for weeks. "Because you would not," he said. "Would not what?" "Look," he said. "Really look at what is happening around you." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Do you remember the night the police cars were down the block?" he asked. "You were in the kitchen doing dishes. You made some comment about how things were getting worse in the neighborhood, how you missed when it felt safe." "I was scared," she said. "I heard sirens, I saw lights. I did not know what was happening." "You assumed you knew," he said. "You assumed it was about danger coming closer, not about danger that had always been there for some people finally becoming visible to you." She knew he was not just talking about crime. He was talking about Malik, about his family, about the invisible boundaries between their worlds. "Malik's older brother," Ethan continued, "was arrested that night. Do you know why?" She shook her head. She had heard rumors, but they had blended into the background noise of a busy life. "He was walking home," Ethan said. "That is it. He had a hoodie on, his headphones in. Someone called the police because he looked suspicious near their car. They searched him. They said he fit a description. They took him in when he pulled his arm away because they grabbed him too hard." "That cannot be the whole story," she said automatically, then winced at her own reflex. "It is the whole story," Ethan said.
except for the part where anyone believed him. He told her about the community center Malik's uncle ran, how they held meetings to help families navigate the court system, how they collected testimonies from kids who had been stopped and questioned more times than they could count, how Malik's family had been scraping together money for a lawyer who would actually fight for his brother instead of urging him to take a plea. "That cannot be the whole story," she said automatically, then winced at her own reflex. "It is the whole story," Ethan said, "except for the part where anyone believed him." He told her about the community center Malik's uncle ran, how they held meetings to help families navigate the court system, how they collected testimonies from kids who had been stopped and questioned more times than they could count, how Malik's family had been scraping together money for a lawyer who would actually fight for his brother instead of urging him to take a plea.
"I went there with him one afternoon," Ethan said. "I listened. I read the papers. I saw the way adults looked at Malik's family, like they were trouble before they even said a word." "And you decided," she said slowly, "that selling my bracelet was the solution." "I decided," he replied, "that doing nothing was worse than doing something imperfect. You talk about responsibility, about protecting what matters. This was me trying to do that. It was stupid, maybe. I know it was wrong not to ask you. I did not trust that you would understand. Not after the way you looked at Malik that day." His voice broke on the last sentence. Claire felt tears sting her eyes. "You are right," she whispered. "I would not have understood. I did not want to." He looked at her, surprised by the admission. "I thought I was protecting our home," she said, "protecting memories. But I was protecting something else, too. A version of myself that never had to ask hard questions about why I felt safe in some spaces and not others, about why certain faces felt like a threat before they even spoke." She stared at the bracelet in her hand. "My mother gave this to me in a hospital room," she said. "She told me it had been her mother's too. She said it carried our history. But she did not tell me the whole truth." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" Claire stood, walked to the bookshelf, and reached up to the top. She pulled down a small worn box he had never seen her open. Inside were letters, yellowed with age, tied with a faded ribbon. "I found these after she died," Claire said. "Letters from someone she never talked about. Someone who signed each one with the same name. Elijah." "Who was he?" Ethan asked. "My father," she answered. "Your grandfather. I never met him. My mother always said he left before I was born, that he did not care enough to stay." She handed him one of the letters. He unfolded it carefully. "Dear Claire," he read aloud, "I do not blame you for being angry. I would be too, if I had been raised to believe I was supposed to be ashamed of half of myself." He stopped, eyes scanning ahead silently. Then he looked up, stunned. "He was black," Ethan said. She nodded. "My mother's family disapproved. They pressured her. She cut him out of our lives to keep their acceptance. She changed my last name. She never showed me these letters. I found them by accident years later." "And you never told me," he said. "I could not even say it out loud to myself," she replied. "I buried it. I told myself it did not matter, that it was in the past." "But it was not," Ethan said quietly. "It is here, in us, in me." "Yes," she whispered. "And while I was burying that part of our story, I was judging people who looked like the man who wrote those letters. I was afraid of something that was already in my blood. The room felt suddenly too small for the truth that had unfolded in it." "There is more," Ethan said.
his voice barely above a whisper. "I took a DNA test." Her heart skipped. "You what?" "A few months ago," he said. "I wanted to know. I felt like something was missing, and you would not talk about it, so I tried to find out myself. I matched with people I have never heard of, names I do not recognize. One of them lives in this city." He paused, watching her carefully. "His last name is Wilson," Ethan said. "Same as Malik's mom." Silence dropped into the room like a stone into water. "Are you saying," Claire began, then could not finish. "I am saying," Ethan replied, "that the boy you accused in our hallway might be our cousin. Not close, maybe, but connected, through the man you tried to erase." The bracelet in her hand suddenly felt heavier than gold. She sat down hard, the breath knocked out of her. All the separate threads she had been ignoring or cutting now tangled into a single knot she could not untie. Her suspicion had not only wounded her son's friend, it had cut across her own unacknowledged family line. "What have I done?" she murmured. Ethan did not answer. He did not have to. The next day, Claire called Malik's mother. Her hands shook as she dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. She almost hung up. Then a voice answered, cautious. "Hello?" "Hi," Claire said, and her voice faltered. "This is Claire, Ethan's mom." A pause. "Yes," Malik's mother said. "What can I do for you?" "I owe you a conversation," Claire said, "and an apology. A real one, not the kind that defends itself halfway through." Another pause, longer this time. "I am listening," Malik's mother said. "Can we meet?" Claire asked. "In person, somewhere neutral. I will come to you." They met at a small park a few blocks from the school. Children played on the swings, while the 2 women sat on a bench, the weight of their history invisible to everyone else. Claire did not start with excuses. She did not mention stress or grief or how much the bracelet had meant. She started with the truth. "I saw an empty space where something precious used to be," she said, "and I filled it with a story about your son, a story I had no right to write." Malik's mother listened without interrupting. "I did not see who actually took the bracelet," Claire continued. "I did not have facts. I had a feeling, and that feeling was not about your son's character. It was about my fears, my biases, the things I never questioned because the world around me treated them as normal." She told her about the pawn shop, about Ethan's decision, about the bracelet resting once again on her dresser, no longer just a symbol of her past, but a reminder of her failure. "I am so sorry," Claire said, tears running down her face. "Not just for accusing him, but for making your family bear the weight of my unresolved issues, for seeing danger where there was kindness, for adding one more story to the pile of moments you have probably had to endure." Malik's mother watched her quietly. "You think this is the first time someone has tried to pin something on my boy?" she asked. "It is not. You think this is the first time I have had to stand in a hallway or an office and explain that my child is not a threat just because he entered a room? It is not." Claire closed her eyes, the reality heavy and undeniable. "But," Malik's mother added, "it is the first time one of those people came and sat on a bench and said the word bias out loud. The first time someone told me they had looked inside themselves and did not like what they saw. That counts for something. It does not erase the hurt, but it matters." They sat in silence for a while, the sounds of children playing around them a gentle counterpoint to the gravity of their conversation. "There is another thing," Claire said finally, "about family." She shared the letters, the DNA test, the match with the Wilson name, the possibility that their lives were woven together in ways neither of them had known. Malik's mother laughed once, a short, astonished sound. "Life really does not run in straight lines," she said. "No," Claire agreed, "it does not." They did not declare themselves family that day. They did not rush to embrace a connection that still needed time and careful exploration. But they did not turn away from it either. They left the door open, a possibility waiting to be walked through. In the weeks that followed, things did not magically fix themselves. Trust did not snap back into place like an elastic band. It was rebuilt slowly, layer by fragile layer. Claire went to the community center with Ethan. She did not go as a savior or a donor, but as a listener. She sat in folding chairs and heard stories that stretched her heart in painful ways. Stories of boys who looked like the man who had written her father's letters. Stories of girls who walked home with keys between their fingers, just in case. She joined a book club that did not read the same old comfortable novels, but books that asked hard questions about race and identity and history. Sometimes she felt defensive. Sometimes she cried. She kept showing up anyway. At home, she and Ethan talked more. Not always smoothly, not always without tension, but more honestly. He showed her the messages from his new relatives, the family tree slowly branching on his screen. Names, faces, stories that had been kept from them now breaking through the soil. One afternoon, Malik came over again. He stood on the front step, hands in his pockets, eyes wary. Ethan opened the door and grinned. "You coming in, or are you gonna hover like a ghost?" Ethan asked. "I am considering my options," Malik replied, but there was a flicker of humor there now. Claire came to the doorway, her stomach knotting. She did not expect forgiveness. She did not feel entitled to a second chance. But she had learned that not showing up was its own kind of harm. "Hi, Malik," she said quietly. "Hi," he replied, studying her face. "I know I have already apologized to your mom," she said, "but I want to say it to you as well. I am sorry. I was wrong. What I did was not fair, and it was not just a misunderstanding. It was prejudice. I am working on it, but I know that does not undo what happened." He listened, his expression serious. "You know," he said slowly, "I used to think adults had it all figured out, that once you got to your age, you just knew better. Lately, I'm starting to realize that some of you are still learning too." "We are," she said, "some of us much later than we should." He nodded once. "Okay," he said, "then I guess we can all keep learning. Just do not expect extra credit for doing what you should have done in the first place." A small smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "That is fair." The three of them spent the afternoon in the living room, music playing softly in the background, game controllers passing from one pair of hands to another. Every so often, Claire caught sight of the bracelet on her wrist, glinting in the light. It no longer felt like a relic to be guarded above all else. It felt like a reminder that sometimes the things we think we are protecting are actually protecting us from the truth. That we cling to objects and stories because facing our own reflection is scarier than losing anything we own. Later that evening, Claire stood by the window, watching Ethan and Malik joking on the sidewalk as the sun dipped low. She thought of her mother, of the secrets she had carried. She thought of Elijah, the man whose letters she had finally read all the way through. She thought of the family tree growing on Ethan's screen, roots pushing down into soil that had been ignored for too long. She knew she could not change the moment she had looked at Malik and seen a suspect instead of a child. That moment would always exist, a bruise in their shared history. But she could decide what came after. She could choose to tell the truth about it, to her son, to Malik, to herself. Her world had not been shaken by a missing bracelet. It had been shaken by the realization that she had lived most of her life in a story that cast some people as dangerous before they even spoke. A story that had robbed her not only of empathy, but of her own heritage. The devastation of that realization did not destroy her. It dismantled the walls she had built around her heart, brick, fearful brick, and left space for something else to grow. Not a perfect identity wrapped in certainty, but an honest one. One that could say, "I was wrong. I learned. I am still learning." And in that space, new stories began to form. Stories where missing things were not excuses to point fingers, but invitations to ask better questions. Stories where protecting what mattered meant protecting each other, not just the objects we owned. In the end, the lesson was not carved into stone or delivered as a neat slogan. It lived in the choices Claire made every day when she opened her door, her mind, her heart. It lived in the way she looked at Malik now and saw not a shadow at the edge of her belonging, but a boy with a future she had a responsibility to honor. It lived in the way she listened when Ethan challenged her, not as an attack, but as a gift. It lived in a thin gold bracelet resting quietly on her wrist, a circle that had once been broken, now carried as a promise. A promise that she would never again let fear write the first draft of her stories.